Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, Arsenal, they're up and running under Unai Emery, but there's no sign of Mesut Ozil after he pulled out of their 3-1 win over West Ham with a cold. Chelsea, are they for sale? The Sunday Times, they're convinced that they are. Roman Abramovich is ready to cash in after 15 years in West London. And the special one, he comes out fighting ahead of Manchester United's Premier League clash with Tottenham at Old Trafford tomorrow night. Here to cast their expert view on the sport's biggest stories, Andy Dunn is the chief sports writer at The Mirror. Alyson Rudd is a sports journalist with The Times, and Neil Custis, he's the the Manchester correspondent for The Sun. Morning, guys. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. How's Huddersfield? Yes, enjoy your...
It's nothing I want to relive. I have to say, it's always a great atmosphere when you go there, but the game yesterday was not in the pantheon. It really wasn't.
OK, maybe we'll talk about one or two of the other stories, one or two of the other games during today's show. OK, don't forget you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on your screen over the next 90 minutes. OK, let's have a look at some of the papers then. Big story this, the Sunday Times convinced that Chelsea are for sale. So convinced, it's on the front page, Sunday Chelsea for sale exclusive. The Sunday Times this morning, it's on the front page of their business and money section. Abramovich plotting the sale of Chelsea FC. And just in case you're unsure about the story, it's there for a third time, front page of the sports section. Abramovich, he's open to offers for Chelsea. What about some of the football played yesterday, though? Mo Salah scoring for Liverpool. It only takes a Mo. He did score against Brighton yesterday at Anfield. They are top. Another big win for them. Good result for them in the week at Palace as well. They've made it onto the back page of the Daily Star this morning as well. Manchester United in action tomorrow night against Tottenham. The precious ones, Lou Macari, former Manchester United player. He says they're even Sir Alex Ferguson couldn't deal with the modern-day egos in the dressing rooms at Premier League clubs. That's The Mirror. Transfer story as usual on the back of the Express. Paris Saint-Germain, they're eyeing up Christian Eriksen. He's got a contract standoff, of course, with Tottenham. As things stand, Paris Saint-Germain want to sign him, according to the Express. Back of the Sun, handball controversy yesterday at Molineux. This is Wolves' draw with Manchester City. Manchester City slipping up yesterday. Was it handball? We'll talk about that a little bit later on, along with the latest chat about VAR too. Back of the Mail, the Ozil puzzle. We're coming straight onto that this morning. Where was he yesterday? Why didn't he play for Arsenal? Substituted against Chelsea last week. Didn't play yesterday for Arsenal. 3-1 win. They are finally up and running though under Unai Emery. It's his first win as the Arsenal manager. Ali was there yesterday. Dunny was there too. I was there. The big question is, where was Mesut Ozil? Why didn't he play, Andy? Are we buying the illness? I've read your report, by the way, so be careful what you say. Yeah.
We have to take the manager's word for it. He was ill. It was significant that when he'd been conducting his press conference in English, and when the question on Ozil came up, he had to turn to his translator to try and explain then that Ozil had some form of illness, a cold, blocked up apparently. I think what we need to do, so we have to take the manager's word for it. You can't say to them, that the manager's lying. However, if we have a look at the timeline of events, you referenced it then. At Stamford Bridge last Saturday, we all saw him walk off. I mean, the prisoners walked quicker to the gallows than Ozil walked off that field, absolutely bottom lip trembling, barely gave Emery a second glance, barely shook his hand, threw down his tracksuit top. The week then was dominated. Listen, he's everyone's favourite scapegoat, isn't he? So the week then was dominated on how Emery had made a bold decision to substitute him. One that didn't work, by the way. It was 2-2 when Ozil came off and they were beaten 3-2. The whole week's then dominated by the debate, the whole Arsenal week, is he going to drop Ozil? Does Ozil's style of play, can it be fit into Emery's intense approach to the game? It's all dominated. Then he gets sick on Friday and doesn't play. So, you can look at that as a coincidence. And then and then Emery then explaining that actually he did come to the game yesterday. He left training ill on Friday, but Emery then had him at the game, apparently, and he went into the dressing room on Saturday. So how come, if a player was ill, why would Emery invite him to the game on Saturday? And if you turn up for work, if you're ill, you don't go into the office and not work. You either stay at home or you don't. So the whole thing is, that's right. The headline's right. Ozil puzzle. That is correct. On a broader picture, is this going to be an issue of Mesut Ozil fitting into Emery's style of play? It is. My point of view is that Emery should find a way to get him in that team because he's the best player at Arsenal. I know people, just relentlessly have a go at him for the perceived lack of work rates. But let me tell you this. When Chelsea scored last week, when Pedro scored that first goal, it was Mkhitaryan who wasn't tracking back Marcus Alonso for the run, who let him run on, not Mesut Ozil. Mesut Ozil isn't responsible for Mustafi's poor defending or for Hector Bellerin's recklessness and indiscipline in terms of going forward too rashly and being exposed defensively. He's not the root of all problems as Arsenal, and he is the highest class player, and Emery's got to find a way to get him in that team. And Arsenal haven't got enough class players to be able to say, well, actually, you know what, Mesut Ozil, he's got this new long-term deal, big money, we're just not going to play him. They can't afford to do that going forward. He has to find a way to get him in that team and get him playing well. That's Emery's job.
Ali, did you detect a change in approach under the new manager in terms of the way that he deals with Ozil?
Well, yeah, I mean...
He was certainly indulged by Wenger, wasn't he?
Indeed, and it didn't seem to matter what happened, or even occasionally Wenger might air some doubts about him. He'd still play him, and they didn't. And he'd play him usually in the same position. I think you made some really good points there, Andy. It's about it's a relationship, isn't it? Emery's also trying to work out a system and to work out how he changes Arsenal and makes the team successful. Ozil's job isn't just to be a creative footballer. His job is to help the new manager do that and to be open to suggestions about how he might play differently or in a different position or just behave differently or be a different sort of leader for the team. And at some point, and we don't know if this is the point where it's happened early, the manager has to say, well, actually, I'm in charge, and creative though you may be, if you're not being receptive to the fact I need you to help me out here, be adaptable, it's too simplistic to say, oh, he doesn't chase back, I agree. But if there are other things he wants him to do and he's not doing them, then maybe he wasn't planning to play him against West Ham, or maybe he was planning to play him in a different position. Maybe the conversation didn't go as Ozil liked. And Ozil, we also have to stress, he's in a difficult personal place at the moment. He's unhappy with the way his country has treated him, and he's been open about that, and he's received some support and quite a lot of antagonism for it. So the dynamic is really fascinating, because you're absolutely right, Arsenal can't afford to let a very expensively paid player who's got a new contract sort of just drift by. But equally, Ozil has some responsibility to acknowledge he has a new manager who needs to learn how to make that team tick.
Is he a special case?
Well, I think
special talent, no doubt about that, Neil. But is he a special case?
I think the problem comes when a player starts to believe that he is a special case. I think he was often indulged too much under Wenger, and nobody, I think anyone who saw the game the previous weekend when he was hooked, disagreed with the decision, even though you said it went on.
I disagreed with it.
Well, I agreed with it, and although you say they went on to win 3-2, I don't think that was because Ozil was off the pitch. So I do think he's been indulged in the past, and I do think that if a manager comes in and is walking into such big shoes as he is with Arsene Wenger, he's trying to establish a way to play, which I do think is very different. I do think it's more energetic, high-paced, pressing, leaves holes at the back. But, I mean, I thought it was a tremendously exciting game to watch yesterday, even without Ozil's presence. And this highly talented player is not buying into it.
How are you watching it? You were at 3 o'clock kickoff at Huddersfield?
I watched it last night on Match of the Day. It was certainly more exciting than what I was at. And he's trying to establish that, and a star player is not buying into it. What does he do? And all the other players in the dressing room are going to be looking at this manager, trying to establish himself, trying to put his mark on the club, and seeing, can a player, act like this and get away with it? Anyway, I'd love a manager one day to come out when he's in a press conference and say, there's a story about a training ground bust-up, and to say, absolutely right, there was a training ground bust-up and he stormed out.
And I told him to go, yeah.
Yeah, and I told him to go.
Exactly. But in terms of that, I understand all that and the idea of the other players, maybe he's not pulling his weight, but, you can't get round the fact that there are hierarchies in dressing rooms, in football, and he is Arsenal's marquee player, has been Arsenal's marquee player. And I think if you've got a player of that talent, then some of the times your job within that team is to try and get the best out of that talent, so you can cover for Mesut Ozil. That's what happens. I mean, that is what being a team is all about. That's what I'm sure players, and I'm not comparing them in any way with a Ronaldo or a Messi, But that's what other players in that team recognise, you know, and they are there not just to facilitate him, but to try and get the best out of him. I just think that Arsenal have not got enough, nowhere near enough, high-quality players to be able to afford to have their highest quality player frozen out.
Assuming that he's been tucked up in bed all weekend, Ali, with his Lemsip, and he gets the all clear from the club medics tomorrow, should he start against Cardiff at the weekend?
It's not the ideal place for him to go, is it? It's the sort of place you have to go and be on it physically and prepared to graft rather than be delicate with your passing. I think it would be a triumph if he did go and play well. That would be the outcome everyone involved would want. Because Emery's come from a club where, I mean, he's had to manage Neymar, for goodness sake. He knows what it's like to have a player bigger than the manager and for it to be all about a player being happy. And it almost doesn't matter what happens. You've got to say the right things about a player, make sure the player doesn't look grumpy. He's probably had enough of that, to be quite honest. And he's come to London and he wants to manage a proper team with they all pull together in the right direction. I think it would be an absolute coup if he got Ozil playing at Cardiff and playing the way we all want him to. And in those sort of 6 days that are left, they came to some agreement that the team comes first. I suspect he won't start them.
Listen, some of the players should be quite grateful for the presence of Ozil because he is such an easy scapegoat. It is so easy to focus on him because of, you know, the simplistic thing of his body language and the way he carries his shoulders and, you know, droops. It's so easy. And that walk-off, that exaggerated, theatrically slow walk-off, which I mentioned there, that just, you know, that's easy to write about. It's easy to pick up on.
So why does
on
he
television.
do it? Why does he do it then?
But that's the way he feels. I mean,
no,
that's
because
just,
he's doing it to it's me, poor me. You know, he was right. He was right to take him off. So why be all theatrical about it? Just get off the pitch, get someone else on, and try and win the game.
But that's
it's the manager's decision. That's
the way it is. You know, that is his personality. What I'm saying is, it's easy to focus on that. Should he be different? Well, maybe. But then you should only really be interested in how many assists that he's coming up with, or how many
so you
goals.
Think those sort of theatrics are okay when he's going off the pitch?
They don't bother me.
They don't bother. Well, okay. Well, I think it's given out the wrong message, and I think it's almost a signal of defiance against a new manager.
Let's talk a little bit about the performance. Did you see signs yesterday of Emery's master plan?
No, and I don't think... No. Not really, no.
I was trying to tease you into saying yes. It surprised
all coming together.
Next.
Well, I think...
Don't assume at this level, that's what I say.
It looked too much like the Arsenal of last season. So this was the first time I've seen Arsenal under Emery live, and I didn't see much that was different, to be honest. There was a nervousness that feeds off the crowd. The crowd weren't that much different than they were last season. And until they got quite a fortunate own goal, then they played well. Then the weight off their shoulders visibly lifted. They played some lovely attacking football. But the balance between the great attacking talent they have and how they cope with a counter-attack, they seem very vulnerable to that. I don't doubt the manager can see that, and he's trying to work out a system to make it work, because you do not take over at manager and think defensively. What you do is you think about attacking, but you've got to be a bit more pragmatic. I'm sure he'll get there, because towards the end of the game, it looked good. It did look good. But to start with, it didn't feel different.
No, OK.
I thought managers weren't allowed to be pragmatic anymore.
We'll get on to him.
I'm sorry.
Don't worry, it's coming.
Lacazette made a difference, I thought.
Sorry?
Lacazette made a difference when he came on.
I
thought they looked a bit more threatening then, but still vulnerable defensively.
But he's making decisions in front of us, isn't he? I mean, a half-time substitution to bring Lacazette on is saying, I'm still thinking tactically here, I haven't quite got it right.
Second game on the spin, he's done that, isn't it?
Yeah, why didn't he get it right first time from the off, though? OK, let's talk a bit about West Ham as well, Andy, because you've written about Pellegrini here. 3 defeats in his first 3 games as the West Ham manager. He's a world-class manager, according to David Sullivan, the man who appointed him. Pellegrini says he's happy, but Wolves, they're up next and the claws will be sharpening if they lose at London Stadium next weekend. Why do you say that after just, because 3, they're into 4 next week?
Because the following fixtures after Wolves at the London Stadium are Everton away, Chelsea at home, Manchester United at home. The mythical fixture computer has not been kind to them at all. And I think that's a real relevance in this day and age, because the time frame for managers becoming under pressure is getting shorter and shorter. We know that. Listen, I look back to last season. I mentioned it to you yesterday at the game that, you know, Frank de Boer was sacked after 4 Premier League games. Crystal Palace went on to finish 11th, was it? You know, other chairmen, other owners will be looking at that and not necessarily wondering if that's a template for what to do. But Stoke City, for example...
It proves it can be done.
It proves it can be done. And Stoke City, for example, we're regretting to the end of the season that they hadn't acted quicker in Mark Hughes' case, without a doubt, even though it still didn't work with the follow-up.
But West Brom had Pulis, Megson briefly.
Yes.
And then Alan Pardew, and then twisted again.
And then Darren Moore again. And
that's 4 in one season.
And it didn't quite work out.
Manager.
But what I'm saying is, so that is, there is a precedent there that Palace have set. Now, I'm not saying at all, as I say in a piece, there's no chance of that happening at West Ham, no matter what Wolves come and do at West Ham on Saturday. There's no chance of that. The West Ham owners have proved themselves to be loyal and to be patient. But that's 4 games. The following 3 fixtures are very tough. So you've got 7 fixtures there. Now, also, while I mention a fixture schedule, it's too easy to hide behind that. You know, don't forget they've been beaten at home by Bournemouth. And that game yesterday was against an Arsenal team who were decidedly vulnerable. I mean, they were so vulnerable. That was a game that West Ham could have won had they taken their chances. It's their own fault for not taking the chances. When Pellegrini says he's happy with the performance, well, part of the performance is Arnautovic taking more than that one chance. It's Robert Snodgrass putting him ahead just before half-time when he should have done. So actually, their fixtures, OK, you're not going to sort of be too harsh on them getting hammered at Liverpool in the opening game. But these next 2 games, those performances haven't... People are saying, well, they're improving, and that yesterday's performance was the best of the 3. But, you know, you've still shipped 9 goals in 3 games and scored only 2. Is he under pressure? Yes, he is. Every manager's under pressure who gets off to a 0-3 start. And the fixtures ahead, you know, don't look great. And Arnautovic is injured.
Very American.
No, match day 4 coming up.
Yeah, match day 4 is a big one for him, let me tell you.
OK, match day 3 is still a big day for Chelsea, but they've got this to answer as well. It's on the front page of the Business and Money section of the Sunday Times. Abramovich plots the sale of Chelsea. More on that coming next in part 2 of the Sunday Supplement. Welcome back. Sunday Times story this morning about Roman Abramovich. It's made it onto the front page. Chelsea for sale, exclusive. It's on their business and sports section. It's in their sports section. David Walsh, their columnist, has also written about it. Ali, we were just discussing, weren't we, a few moments ago, that Michael Knighton, back in 1989, wanted to buy Manchester United for... Well, agreed to buy Manchester United for £20 million. Eventually, it was... eventually, it didn't go through. Eventually, but now it'll cost you about £2 billion to buy a football club. That's traditionally at the top end of English football. What do we feel about this story, Abramovich's mood towards Chelsea, towards English football, towards the Premier League and towards this country at the moment?
I was not surprised that he's thinking of getting people involved to help him sell it for that amount of money. He was deeply wounded by having his passport withheld, so he could not attend the FA Cup final this season. And he almost immediately said, OK, my plans for redeveloping Stamford Bridge, I'm not bothering with that anymore. Which felt like a fit of pique, and maybe he'd get over it. But I think there's a political angle of you know, relationships between this government and Russian businessmen, and it's not great at the moment. But on a deeper level, Abramovich doesn't like, as I understand it, he does not like being seen as just a very wealthy Russian investor. He thinks he's become part of the community in West London, and he's done a lot of community work. And he felt, as I understand it, he felt that pulling the passport, delaying the passport, was a...
This is the visa for the entry into the country.
Yeah, just saying, we're putting on hold your ability to be in this country, was a snub and a misunderstanding of the role he's played in this country. A lot of local charities and people have benefited enormously, and he hoped that redeveloping the stadium would create jobs and keep the area booming. He felt he was being magnanimous and doing a good thing for this country. And he's clearly just thought, well, if no one cares that I've got a good relationship here, and everything I've done for the area is being ignored and not valued, I've had enough. The irony is, I think, that he's just appointed a manager. He's not been appointed because he wins trophies, but he's been appointed because he might bring fun football, which we've always assumed he wanted more of at Chelsea. And if he sells, he's not going to be part of that new wave of style of the way the club play. So it's slightly sad, actually, that he's thinking, I've had enough.
Well, I completely agree with what you said. Everything he said there, I think it was absolutely disgraceful that he had that visa withheld. They wanted to they targeted a very high-profile name to make the point. Totally unfair. He'd made his home here. He'd done an awful lot for English football, which at the end is our national sport and what people love and are passionate about. And if and David Walsh has done a very good column today about how, you know, if somebody irks him or there's something he doesn't like, he will react and he will make a move. And there's good stories done in there about how Ancelotti, the first day after, in defending the title, how they'd won 6-0, I think it was, against West Brom, and he was hauled around to Abramovich's house because he wasn't happy with his managerial style. So he's very, you know, if he's irked, he will react. And I don't blame him for this. I think it's dreadful news for Chelsea. I think it's worrying news for Chelsea fans because despite the managerial changes of 10 in 10 years, the trophies keep flowing in. It's a buzzing club, and it's all down to him. The only thing I am surprised about is that it's not a mystery Chinese consortium, because it's the first time in about 10 years we haven't had a mystery Chinese consortium. In other words, we don't know who it is.
I take on board everything. I take on board everything that's said, but you know, the fact of the matter is if the government are withholding a visa, then they've got to have reasons. And to be perfectly frank, just because he's a good football club owner doesn't mean that the government should say, oh, well, that's right, you know, we think we should withhold your visa, but we won't just because you're a good football club owner. A good football club owner.
So what's he done not to have a visa?
I don't know.
Not to get back into the country where he's lived.
What do you know what he has or he hasn't?
Well, what's he done not to get back into a country where he's lived for 40, 50 years? Had he been doing
things...
We
don't know, that's all. I mean, there's no way we know, obviously. But
so why didn't they withhold it before, then, if he's such...
Because he had to renew it.
Because new things have developed, because he had to renew it. And new things have developed. This is government we're talking about. This isn't just, you know, football. This isn't just about Chelsea playing on a Saturday afternoon.
This is the important stuff.
We don't know what. We don't know the reasons why that visa decision was made.
He's a high-profile target, scapegoat, then trying to make a statement.
You don't know. Well, whatever they're trying to do. No, I don't know.
No, right.
Which is why I'm saying I don't know. But I will respect...
But we're on here to say we do know.
Well, yeah, but I will respect the government's decision to withhold the visa. I will assume they have reasons. Whether they be political reasons or other reasons, I don't know. I really don't know. I just do think it's quite insular football to say, oh, but hang on, he's great for football. And he's, you know, he's quite good for the local community.
We wouldn't say he's...
What I'm saying is...
But what else has he done outside of that to have this... But what else has he done outside of what he's done for football in England? What has he done outside of that in the last 6 or 8 months or year to have this visa withheld?
Because the visa was up for renewal, and clearly there have been developments in Anglo-Russian relations. So, Alyson, this is... we don't know.
So we bar a football club owner?
They are not going to say... Well, I don't know. We don't know why.
Most political commentators at the time said it was the government making a statement as opposed to it being something very specific about something they didn't like about Abramovich. Yeah, so he has every right to...
Shots across the bows, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm sure he does have every right to be peeved. What I'm trying to say is we can't just turn around and say, well, the government shouldn't do this because of what he's done at Chelsea Football Club. There are grander...
No, we're saying why he's irked. We're saying why he might sell. That's the point Alyson was making, why he might sell.
He's irked because he can't get the visa. I assume that's the case. On a football level as well, maybe it might be the case that after... How long has he been here? 2003? 15 years. After 15 years and an awful lot of investment, he might fancy actually trying to get his money back. And certainly if he can't come into the country as often as he once could, that might affect it. And he might just think that 15 years... He's probably taken it as far as he could. If he gets $2 billion for it, I would have thought that would probably... I mean, I don't know, but it wouldn't be... Would it be a profit?
Well, can you remember how much he bought the club for?
I can, about 240 million now. Yes. No, 140 million.
150?
Yes, yeah, 150, but what he's invested since then is at least $1 billion.
Yeah, 1.1 billion, yeah.
1.1 billion, yeah, so
he's still coming out of it okay, then?
He'll come out of it. I don't think he's short of a bubble too anyway.
No,
I think he's doing okay.
I think $2 billion's a lot, though, for...
Yeah.
We're considering that...
Man United would have a chance of going for $2 billion if they went for sale, and they're a completely different proposition.
Well, their stock market valuation this week, Man United, was $4 billion, wasn't it?
That's the highest share price they've had.
3.2 billion.
Yeah.
And they were talking, the story in the Daily Mail this week was talking about Liverpool at $2 billion as well.
2 billion.
Yeah.
And they still said no.
Yeah.
The last person that we know to bid for the club, which was confirmed by the Mail a few months ago, was the chemicals tycoon Sir Jim Radcliffe. That was a no to £2 billion. How many people can realistically have an interest in Chelsea, have an interest in football, and will want to buy them?
I'd go out on a limb and say it's a niche market, actually. I mean, you know...
Chelsea or football.
Controversial as ever, Ali.
People with over £2 billion to spend on a football club in a country that isn't their country.
Yeah.
And they would have other reasons for doing so, just as we assumed Abramovich had other reasons for buying a football club. If you're not English and you buy into an English football club and you're very wealthy, you're not doing it just because you love football. You're doing it because it plays well where you come from politically, power, indulgence.
OK. Well, this story, I'm sure, will continue to run over the next few days. It's all across the Sunday Times this morning. Chelsea, they do play Newcastle today at St James's Park. Rice, go on. What?
Well, no, I mean...
Is this what you're here for? Is this
well, no, I'm just wondering when the collective defence of Mike Ashley's going to come from everyone. There seems to have been doing the rounds this week. Everyone seems to be defending him. What a great owner he is, and how wonderful he's done for Newcastle United Football Club. So I'm just waiting for it.
That was a while ago.
Weren't you moaning about Rafa Benitez complaining about buying players?
He's got it in for you this morning.
I know. And
what's all this about?
I don't know.
Well, he did an article saying...
Neil, I gave him a lift here today as well. Can you believe that?
He did an article saying...
You might get a lift back, though.
He did an article saying that Rafa Benitez shouldn't moan, right? If any manager in the Premier League has a reason to moan right now, it's Rafa Benitez. A man who has done sensational things under difficult circumstances at Newcastle United, someone who's actually made a profit in the transfer market, has had transfer windows where he's not been able to do any business, has had promises which haven't come through, has tried to wants the training ground, which is derelict, to be better, wants more investment in an academy, wants to realise the potential of a football club, and is being undermined every step of the way by an owner, right, who... Andy Gray, Richard Keys, everyone seems to think is doing a great job, stabilised the football club, stabilised it over the last 10 years, right? Over the last 10 years at Newcastle United, they've had an average position of 12th, and that doesn't include the 2 relegations. Before that, in the Premier League, the average position was 8th, but they also finished 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 2 FA Cup finals, 4 semi-finals, qualified for Europe regularly, but actually stabilised the situation. He's actually doubled the debt along the way as well. How he's done that is beyond me, given how little he's spent. Sports Direct's probably done all right from it, and obviously there's been quite a few trainers going out this last few weeks. But just
checking your footwear. I know you weren't happy with yours this morning, were you?
Blisters. But for people to come out and defend this man, when and people point to the 10th place finish last season as a defence of Mike Ashley's strategy. So it's to do with that man there, right? And if Newcastle lose him, I swear that it'll be one of the worst moments in our recent history. And also another thing that irks people who are Newcastle fans is this thing that Newcastle fans seemingly have an entitlement to wanting to be up there and winning trophies and unrealistic expectations. Newcastle haven't won domestic trophies since 1955. There's nothing unrealistic about it. They just want a bit of hope. A bit of hope that things will be better. They want to be competitive and they want to see their football club being run properly. And there's 54,000 go every week and they're having the mick taken out of them.
Andy, I'm going to give you a chance to rebut this, but please don't mention the expectations in the North East.
I never did.
Around St James. No, it's only because every time we talk about Newcastle, someone brings up the expectations.
I never did, and it certainly wasn't as black and white as that. And the article I read just before the season started was saying that they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You don't have to. You can still think that Mike Ashley is not a very good football club owner, which I'm the same. I wouldn't particularly want him owning my football club, but at the same time, that doesn't mean you have to deify Rafa Benitez.
Why not?
Because you don't have to, because the job he's done has been good. The job he's done has been... He came out with a quote saying that I can't keep on performing miracles. Well, it wasn't a miracle that he got them out of the Championship and back to the Premier League. They had the biggest wage bill.
It was a miracle that he got up to 10th last season.
That's what he said yesterday, yeah. Today he says it's a miracle.
Yeah, well, they did well to get to 10th last season. Palace were 11th, I mean, there's nothing... That was concertinaed in there. Getting them back into the Premier League was good, but they had the biggest wage bill. I know there were mitigating factors in that. I think there was some carry over in terms of payments.
That wage bill you mentioned about the 120 million, 30 million of that was bonuses. Take that out. 6 players were already on loan and were being paid for, so that wage bill was not on the squad.
That they paid big wages to get out of the Championship and on decent players. And have they invested as much as they would like to since then? Absolutely not. Of course they're not. And the point I'm making is it, and that's what the thing about this debate is that, you know, the idea of Mike Ashley, total villain, Rafa Benitez, total hero. I understand that, and people up there, you know, are better informed than me on that. However, looking from the outside and looking at the job that Benitez has done at other football clubs, that have been good, but there is always a repetition of the fact that he will always intimate that he's not getting the support he deserves from the board. And, you know, that happened at Napoli, it happened certainly happened early on, in very, very, very early on, when he famously, the quote he asked for what was he asked for? I can't remember. It was some furniture analogy. He asked for a chair or a lamp or something like that. And that is a repetition in Benitez's career. That was the only point I was actually making. I wasn't making Mike Ashley out to be some sort of fantastic club owner. And the one thing I would say as well, which I totally agree with Newcastle fans on this one, is I think what Ashley's... The thing I think is the worst thing that he would be guilty of is that if he can sell that club and isn't selling that club. Because we're talking about clubs for sale. I mean, how much is Newcastle United worth? How much could he get for it? Why are there no serious buyers? Well,
there was a serious buyer, but he wouldn't negotiate with them.
And I think that of all the things that Newcastle fans should be annoyed, I think that's the one that if there are serious buyers out there, then why isn't he selling?
Well, they had a serious offer on the table. It was a good offer, and he wanted about 50 million more. He wanted the payments all up front, and so he didn't accept it. It was the best thing for Newcastle. He wouldn't have walked away with it empty-handed. All this, you know, stabilisation and investment he's put in the club, it doesn't exist. He gets all his money back and more. So he's not interested in what's best for Newcastle United, and it proved it with that takeover bid.
Ali, thoughts on Rafa? And he's obviously got Neil wrapped around his little finger.
Well,
Rafa is very
he's
impressive.
had one or two in the past.
Man and an impressive coach. He is an impressive coach. But you have to have a sneaking admiration for Mike Ashley. So Rafa Benitez is still there. I mean, if he's done all those things you've just listed, I'm going to list them all back at you. It's kind of clever that he's made a profit, not given the money he promised to the manager, and the manager stays there and they stay in the Premier League.
It's not clever at all. Mike Ashley, Rafa Benitez is still there because he loves the football club. He loves the passion of the fans, and it's his closest thing he's experienced to Liverpool, which he loved as well. And that's the reason he's still there. It's nothing to do with Mike Ashley.
It's an emotional show today.
It's nothing to do with Mike Ashley being clever. Mike Ashley's playing on it. And
exactly.
And that's even more disgraceful. That's even more disgraceful.
Don't leave, Rafa, don't leave.
No, but let me just say this last thing. Let me just say this last thing. If Rafa Benitez can get to 10th, right?
Yes.
While making a profit at the transfer, with that team he had, the frustration is, what more could he do? What more could he do with more investment? What more could he do with that club? That is the frustration.
Yeah, but I have a feeling... You have to say, Neil, I totally agree with that, but that must also be the frustration... that's not unique, surely, of football clubs. That must be the frustration of other football clubs, surely.
What?
I'm just saying, I agree.
But more so with this one over 10 years.
More so
with
the one that's got 54,000.
And there's not another club that gets 54,000 through the gate, time and time again, that is being held back to achieving what it could potentially achieve.
I'm not a fan of repetition at all, but I've a funny feeling that Neil Custis is going to be saying exactly the same things about Jose Mourinho. He's coming next.
Well, he gets backed at least.
Welcome back with us this morning, Andy Dunn, Alyson Rudd and Neil Custis. Let's just remind you what's in the papers. If you're going to do a story, do it with conviction. The Sunday Times have definitely done that this morning. Front page, Chelsea, they're for sale. It's on the front page of their business and money section. Abramovich plotting the sale of Chelsea. And if you really needed convincing, it's on the front page of their sports section as well. Abramovich opening the door for a sale of Chelsea. Liverpool, though, they're in good form at Anfield. Another win for them. Mo Salah scoring against Brighton yesterday. Liverpool top of the table. Manchester City, they're not anymore. Handball yesterday at Molineux. They drew 1-1. Pep Guardiola refusing to criticise the referee. We'll come on to that in part 5 of today's programme. We've already talked about the Gunners. They are up and running under Unai Emery. But the Mail on Sunday, the Ozil puzzle wasn't there, so he didn't play yesterday. Pulled out sick before the game. And Jose, nobody is happy at Old Trafford. Certainly nobody's happy when they lose against Brighton, as they did last Sunday, Alyson. What was your verdict on... Let's go back to the performance against Brighton, the attitude of the players, which Paul Pogba, the captain, spoke about after the game, and then the subsequent coverage all the way up to today's game.
Yeah, I mean, first of all...
All the way up to today's coverage and, of course, the game tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, astonishing, first of all, that someone who's been appointed captain in difficult circumstances because of the publicity about the relationship he had with Mourinho and not thanking him for supporting him and so on. He's made captain. The performance was really quite dreadful, actually. Anyone can go to a club like Brighton and lose, but you would lose trying. It was a dispiritingly lacklustre performance. So their captain for the day says, my attitude was wrong and the rest of my teammates' attitude was wrong. We just didn't get it right on the day. I mean, it is quite astonishing that someone associated that... The captain of Manchester United to say that is remarkable, I think. A huge club like Manchester United, who can pride themselves on many things, but most of all, that sort of sense of integrity, that knowledge that they are a big team who would never take any opposition lightly, who would takes the game so seriously, knows their place, knows their huge fan base. He's saying that the whole team just turned up not really up for it. I found that really odd, and then that reflects poorly on a manager who himself didn't look up for much afterwards, was very glum, didn't offer reasons or even decent excuse as to why it had happened. There's clearly something wrong. You had Ed Woodward in the stands looking stony-faced. Goodness knows why. I mean, he bears some of the responsibility, but he's had a manager who's asked him for dosh. He hasn't given him the dosh, hasn't signed the players he wanted. That's his philosophy. He's got to take some responsibility for that as well. It's partly his job to make sure the manager is on board with what the club wants to do. So they seem a mess, and of course, you're quite right, because there's been no chance for United to play another game midweek or much else happening in the game in the week. It's all been all about what is wrong at Manchester United, and it's been picked apart. In particular, the relationship between Woodward and Mourinho has been picked apart. This whole third season syndrome for Mourinho, there's a sense of this is inevitable saga we're seeing played out yet again, and we're all slightly bored of it. And just the sense of even going to the point of, well, who will be the successor at Old Trafford? And two names seem to be Ryan Giggs and Zinedine Zidane, neither of which I think would be a very good idea. But if you're going to say Mourinho's on the brink, if they're sort of mid-table at Christmas, you've got to come up with some names, I suppose.
Did Mourinho suffer this week in terms of the media narrative that there weren't any, let's say, significant midweek fixtures? Normally we're into a situation where we've either got midweek fixtures in the Premier League or we've got Carabao Cup games with Premier League teams in, or the 6 Champions League games for Christmas. In this case, Andy, there was a blank canvas. There was 5 days of empty space in newspapers this week. Did that affect the media narrative and attitude towards Manchester United, because it was all on them this week?
Yeah, in what you're saying, there was essentially a little bit of a vacuum, you know, after Palace Liverpool on Monday night. Then you had a run of looking ahead to the weekend and then having to pick what the main news was on the agenda. Now, don't forget, it is also very thin, because there's only been, at that point, there'd only been 2 Premier League games. And even we sort of bridle and resist making too many judgments on 2 Premier League games. You know, even we don't say guys.
Unless his name's Pellegrini.
No, he's had 3 now, and I was referring to his 4th. What have I done today? And but what I would say, the reason then why it focuses on Manchester United, one, because of the size, one, because of the character that is Jose Mourinho, but also because it started. This was a narrative that started in the summer. You know, it started in the summer when the apparent unhappiness over the transfer policy is clear. Unhappiness on the pre-season tour, his comments there, that all started. So that's an ongoing story that everyone has run with, and that's why it's been dominating this week.
But it's been, I think, it dominates because Manchester United since Sir Alex Ferguson has...
He's coming off a long run up here.
Yeah. Well, since he's retired...
He's had a breather after Newcastle.
Since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, it has dominated week in, week out. The fact that there's not games, it still dominates. I have to question this attack on Ed Woodward not backing Jose Mourinho. Since Sir Alex Ferguson's retired, Ed Woodward has got £711 million out of the owners. Not their money, the club's money, but they have to sanction it. Before that, the Glazers just weren't spending. So, in defence of Ed Woodward, he has got money out the Glazers to give to his managers. He has backed his managers. He has backed Jose Mourinho to the point of £300 million. The problem this summer was he wanted Harry Maguire. He couldn't get Harry Maguire. Leicester didn't want to sell. They'd already lost one of their star players. They did not want to sell, and the price was getting ludicrous. So that was a big problem. Now, he's unhappy he didn't get him, but I think for Ed Woodward to be, the fact that he was sat in his seat staring out onto the pitch after they'd lost, I mean, why does that become a big issue? Gary Neville's saying that to criticise Ed Woodward as a chief executive. Now, his job is to back the managers, and financially he has done that. He has done that, but he didn't get the centre-back, and that is a problem. That is a big problem. Now, the criticism of Jose Mourinho, I think, dare I say it, because I sound like a fan on Twitter, but the criticism of it has been way over the top, miles over the top, for what I think he's done at Manchester United. Right? Yeah. Now, Liverpool fans are rubbing their hands, Spurs fans are rubbing their hands. He's won more trophies in one season than having in like 10, 12, 15 years. They were the second best team in the country last season, right? They played 2 games. And he is having his CV picked apart. He is having his managerial style picked apart, right? From where Manchester United were, because when he came in, they were absolute rock bottom under Louis van Gaal. The spirit there, everything. From where they were...
Just won a trophy, by the way.
Just won the FA Cup final.
The spirit... I'm talking about the spirit of the football club was at an all-time low, right? It really was. And he picked that up. And, as I say, he's put trophies on the table. He's got them back to second in the league. He's made them relevant again. This is a top manager who's being picked apart, who's being called a dinosaur, and all these sort of things. He beat all of the top. He beat all of the top 6 last season. Spurs in the semi-final. Got to an FA Cup final as well, which they probably should have won. The League Cup final they beat Southampton was the best game I've seen at the new Wembley. How he did... The final against Ajax in the Europa League, I think tactically got spot on. And this bloke's been pulled from pillar to post, for goodness sake. It's ridiculous.
Neil, we all know that. That is all matter of fact what he's won. He won the Europa League and he won the league.
So what are you criticising him for?
For the style of play, simply because they're unattractive to watch.
Right, OK. If Sir Alex... Let me just say, if Sir Alex Ferguson, right, as we all know, was the superb manager that he was and got them playing some fantastic football, everyone's presuming that each manager after that should do exactly the same. If each manager after that was able to do exactly the same, then he wouldn't have been that great.
Neil, they are not. They are not comparing them primarily to other Manchester United sides. The difference that's changed is that other teams, OK, they might not be winning the trophies, but other teams are playing a brand of football that is eminently more attractive than Manchester United's. And even Manchester United fans, certainly fans I know, are growing tired of this. Are growing tired of the fact that it's just not good to watch. Now, you say it's all about trophies. Well, maybe there's a dynamic that's changed in football, and it's called fun. The World Cup made football fun. Jose doesn't get the memo. The fact is that do you want him just grinding out results when other teams are lighting up the Premier League with the way they play? Liverpool have a manager who's won nothing. Right? Their fans see a manager who looks absolutely having the time of his life, delighted and proud and happy to be managing a great football club such as Liverpool. United fans look at a manager who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else than managing such a great club as Manchester United.
And so we're basing the manager on how he looks?
No, we're not. We're basing it on the whole approach.
So if you jump around on the sidelines and do silly antics like that, then you're a better manager.
We're saying why some Manchester United fans, I'm not saying all, why some Manchester United fans will not just turn around and say, well, it's OK, we won the Europa League and we won the League Cup. And we came second last year, 19 points behind City. But we're OK, as long as we grind out results. I don't know whether your mates who are Manchester United fans are saying the same thing, but my friends who are Manchester United fans are saying, well, you know what? We actually do want the team to be more attractive. We actually do want to turn up. And listen, maybe that it has changed. And from a neutral fan's point of view, things have changed. People do want to go and watch, Guardiola-style football, Klopp-style football, or even Pochettino-style football. They want to watch that. Now, I'm not saying that Jose has to do that, but undeniably, you watch more of Manchester United than me, And can you say the last time they got you out your seats? Can you say the last time you were thrilled?
The derby at the Etihad last season.
Yeah.
There are some
absolutely
stats
brilliant.
in the
They were
Sunday
second
Times
half.
today. Some stats
Arsenal
in the Sunday
away.
Times today saying that they are the slowest attacking team in the Premier League, Man United, which is some come down from. I know you don't like going back to the era, but the Fergie era was all about pace. Let's attack
Well, it's
with
not that
pace.
I don't like it. I mean, they're very different
How can you
players
go
and
from
a
a
very
club
different
that
core.
attacked with pace and were proud of their speed of attack to the team that is statistically, it's not an impression, they are statistically the slowest team.
Ali, when you go to watch a game, let's just open up a little bit. But when you're at Arsenal, yesterday, we all have the match day enthusiasm. We wake up in the morning, we're looking forward to the game. What do you expect to see? What do you want to see from a top level Premier League football match? What are your demands and what are your expectations of that game?
You want to see a team who's capable of attacking with some flair, invention. You want to see people try things. Players with individual pace are fantastic, and you want to see how that team sets up so that they don't overcommit and make themselves vulnerable to the counter-attack. And when a team gets that balance right, you're both full of admiration for it, but absolutely, I want to be entertained. And the mood has changed. You want to see pace. You want to see breaks at pace, thinking at pace, and actual running with pace. And United, well, I've just said, it's not just my impression. Statistically, they're slow, and therefore, the contrast is not good.
It's very
difficult.
You're assigned to a Manchester United game, any Manchester United game in the current era under Mourinho. What's your first instinct? What's your reflex thought?
Is it going to be the same? Has he found a way of making it work?
Andy?
Well, I
Tottenham tomorrow night. What are your thoughts tomorrow night? Because Old Trafford, I just think this is the story. Mourinho's the storyline here. Yeah. Whatever happens, they could win 3-0.
Yeah. He is the storyline right now.
Whatever happens, Mourinho will be the same. That's how it feels going into the game.
Yeah, it is. I mean, listen. First of all, any game when you read Man United versus Tottenham, you should be really, really up for it. Really looking forward to it. It should be a good game. Although and United, listen, haven't even conceded a goal against Tottenham in the last 4 seasons at Old Trafford, I think. So you would be expecting United to put on a performance. But yes, it is about him right now. But that is because of things like, I know everyone will say, it doesn't matter. That's because of his 280-second press conference on Friday. Does it matter to us? Well, not that much. But does it make it all about him? Well, yes, it does to a certain extent. And let's face it, he's never had a problem with it being all about him. Let's go away from that fact. So yes, he does dominate at the moment. I just think that what Neil says about United's record and their wins, yes, I totally agree with all that. But I just do think that, for better or for worse, people's expectations, fans' expectations, have just changed. They have just changed. They want to see exciting, attacking, vibrant football, and they're not getting that from United.
No, you were there on Friday for Mourinho's press conference. Yeah. What was your summary of his 4 minutes in the chair? Well, he turned up half an hour early for a start.
Well, yeah,
what was your summary of it?
And it was curt, it was surly, it was one-word answers. But I hate to say this, but after the coaching he's got, I don't blame him in a way, because he is human. He says he doesn't read the papers. He does. I'm sure he knows everything that's being said about him and what have you. And he's got an absolute coating, and I don't think it's deserved. And so I would, to be fair, I would have been in a huff. If you think you've done a good job for your paper, right, and everybody else starts coaching you, I think you might be a little bit irked, and he was irked. And I understand it. Will he stay irked? No, because he just can't keep it in. He'll want to say things. He'll want to come out. Yeah. He'll want to come out fighting. Just as he did, the FA Cup semi-final last season when...
But that was a short press conference, by the way, was it?
Pochettino was a coming coach, and he was going to show that he's a dinosaur and he's the man, and Man United absolutely outplayed them. Likewise, Spurs in the league. So, he will come again, and, I think Monday night, I believe, despite what all these Manchester United fans that everybody knows who are supposedly dissatisfied with him, I think he'll get a great reception. And what Manchester United fans do when they feel that people outside are hammering their manager, or hammering their club and they're under siege is that they come out fighting as well, not literally, but in terms of support. They actually did it with David Moyes. Not so much with Louis van Gaal, because he seriously did send us to sleep, but and I don't think they'll do it on Monday night.
Just quickly, Neil, Mourinho's relationship with the players and the atmosphere around the training ground, a lot has been written about that this week. I'd have to include myself in that, so I'm not trying to exonerate him. But what is Mourinho's relationship like with his players and the atmosphere at Carrington?
Well, I think possibly his public persona and his private persona might be two different things. And I think the air he tries to give off and what's going on behind the scenes can sometimes be different. And if it was such, if it is that poor, then he's done awfully well to get to 3 finals, win 2 trophies, and finish second. It makes me wonder. But it just makes me
know his record.
I thought you were going to say,
yeah, I know, but you say
what
do you want when you go and watch a match? I think what most supporters want, right, unless they've just jumped onto the bandwagon in recent years, I think most supporters want to see their team win. I remember having a conversation once with Frank Clark, who had just recently left Forest, I think, or Man City, and there'd been an awful game on the night before, the Monday night game, and I said, it's an entertainment industry. He says, no, it's not. He says, it's something supporters of their football club go to see their team win. And I think ostensibly that is the case. Now, people say, oh, I want lovely football, I want pretty football, I want this, that and the other.
It's changed.
Man United fans want, Manchester United fans want Manchester United competing for the top prizes again and competing against Manchester City.
Okay,
that's what ostensibly they want.
OK, passionate stuff. Let's see if they compete tomorrow night at Old Trafford, because, of course, Manchester United play Mauricio Pochettino's Tottenham side. OK, next up, we're going to talk international football, because Gareth Southgate's got a squad announcement on Thursday at St George's Park. Let's see who's in, let's see who's out of that squad. That's coming up next on the Sunday Supplement. Welcome back to the Sunday Supplement. As usual, as customary, Goals on Sunday follows us after this show. Let's find out what Ben and Cammy are up to in a few minutes' time.
Morning, Neil. Morning, all. We will be hot on your heels as soon as you come off air at 11 o'clock. Darius Vassell is joining us for Goals on Sunday.
Yes.
Looking forward to speaking to him. He's working at the youth section at Wolves at the moment after they got that cracking point against City yesterday, Cam.
Very much so. He's not been on, Darius. Doesn't do much telly, but he's trying to get into it. So we'll get into his career in Turkey and everywhere else.
Yeah, and obviously missing that penalty Euros as well. It'd be interesting to get his thoughts on that. And, of course, the clamping down on the diving, Cammy.
Yes, that's great, isn't it? It didn't happen in the World Cup, but it's happened at the start of the Premier League.
But should we have VAR as well?
Of course we should.
Talking about all these things a little bit later on.
Oh, should we have VAR? We're going to get on to that subject in part 5 of today's programme. Ben and Cammy, of course, Goals on Sunday, is after us here on the Sunday Supplement. OK, next up for us, though, is the England squad, which Gareth Southgate names. It's his first squad, Ali, of course, since England reached the World Cup semi-final in the summer. The obvious question, does he stick or twist? Does he celebrate the 23 names who got to the World Cup semi-final? Or does he bring in fresh blood, new recruits?
Well, just as I was very relieved there was no open top parade for reaching the World Cup semi-final,
Yes.
I equally don't think there's any need to parade the exact same players and make it a thank you players, thank you, let's all applaud you for being there at the World Cup and being so pleasant and doing so well. You've got to be... Southgate says he's always looking to the future. Well, you've got to start doing that now as well. So, of course, the core of the team will be the same. But just before the World Cup started, there were clamours for the introductions of other players, and Southgate did not want to disrupt the squad. He was worried, for example, about John Joe Shelby, whether he'd fit in or not, even though he might have been a nice option to have because he has good passing ability. So now is the chance. He knows the style, he knows the type of squad he likes in terms of personality as well as playing. He's clearly building around youth with a dash of experience. So now, you're not throwing that apart, you're keeping it, but you also have the ability to test out players who might fit those gaps in the team that meant that England couldn't get further than the semi-final stage. So I personally wouldn't be the least bit offended if the team looked different, and as I'm sure fans aren't so sentimental that they would be sort of sobbing if one of their favourites from the tournament was on the bench or for some reason wasn't there at all. I'd say go for it, Gareth, keep experimenting. You've got to unearth someone who can pass the ball, be reliable, There's this young guy, Maddison. I know he's had so much attention, but I don't see any harm in at least bringing him in now because he's been playing well for Leicester, so go for it.
Andy, do you think they should get a pat on the back at Wembley against Spain?
I do. I think there's no harm in that at all. I really don't. I think they should get acclaim for what they did. You know, it's easy to forget how much they lifted the country. I think it will also set up a good atmosphere against Spain. I think, while agreeing that there is room for a look ahead to the future and for experimentation, I think it would be great for them to treat this game, you know, as a continuation, basically. Listen, let's go out and win this game. It is in the much maligned UEFA Nations League. However, it's still a competitive game, so to speak. You know,
we're maligning a tournament before we've even played in it.
Well, I'm not maligning. I like the idea. I absolutely like the idea. I like the concept. I like the premise. The premise being they are essentially...
You lot said it was much maligned, but
competitive.
The media frenzy.
It's because...
It's a shame Martin's not here today. Martin would have this out with you.
But does he like it?
Huh?
No, right.
No, he's not a fan.
But it's essentially, you know, if you had to sum it up, it would be competitive friendlies. You know, it's trying to give friendlies a competitive edge. And I like the idea. I mean, what is not to like about being with Croatia and Spain and playing them home and away in a relatively competitive game? I don't really see there can be any harm in that. And I think it will give players an extra, even if it's a tiny bit, an extra edge to the game. So I think they should approach this game, the Spain game at Wembley, you know, not as one of these games like, you know, as so often now we seem to portray early season international games as being just a hindrance. Oh, guess what? The Premier League's just getting started. What a shame it's going to have to interrupt for a week by these sorts of games. I think to try and tap into that feel-good factor that we had all summer, he could do with a good performance. So I don't think it's a place, the team is a place to experiment, to make 6, 7, 8 substitutions in. I think he picks a team, what he thinks is the best team to win that game.
There are some players that are in a swirl at the moment, hovering around this England squad. Mm-hmm. One of them is Phil Foden, who you've seen play briefly for Manchester City.
Sadly, only briefly, yeah.
Very briefly. Is he ready for an international call-up to the full England squad?
Well, no, because he's not playing enough football. I mean, I thought that... And this is not Man City bashing, this is just a comment, right? They play at home to Huddersfield. It's pretty much, you know, they've got a strong team anyway. I think Phil Foden should play a half of that game at least, if not started, given the injuries he had. He came on with 9 minutes to go when they're 5-1 up. Now, for me, that doesn't bode well for the future for him, particularly this season, and getting into the England team, because I think it's very difficult for Gareth to pick players that aren't getting more football than that. I would love to see him play, I would love to see what he can do, and I would love to see him given a chance. And I don't think you're taking a risk, because it's not... We're not playing a World Cup semi-final or quarter-final or that. So, you know, a guy as young and energetic as that is not going to be necessarily rusty. He'll be up for it and he'll want to play. So I would love to see him play, so we can see what he can... So other people can see what he can do who haven't seen the brief 5 minutes here, 9 minutes there. You know, he's undoubtedly going to be a better player under the guidance of Pep Guardiola, who speaks very well of him. But I'd just like to see him play more in certain games, particularly maybe coming in at half-time of that Huddersfield game. But I think this sort of thing is what is going to be holding back this.
Has the landscape changed, guys, with international football? Because David Beckham, 21 years of age when he made his senior debut for England, undoubtedly special talent, Manchester United player, majestic, decorated Manchester United, went on to become one of their greats. And now we're talking about a guy who's played 8 minutes in the Premier League this season, being called up to the England squad. Do we accept that the profile and the landscape of international football has changed, that Phil Foden would get a potential opportunity with England? Beckham had to wait until he was 21.
Yeah, no, I was going to say to Neil, you said you felt Foden should have played at least half of that game. Is that because you feel Guardiola has a responsibility, if he has a young England player, to let him show his England manager what he can do, or he has a responsibility to the City fans or to the player himself?
The player himself.
The player himself. Waiting in the wings too long.
The player himself. He has no responsibility to England. I don't think any manager does. But I think he does.
Well, that's a shame, isn't it?
I think he does. I think he does to the player.
But that also fits into your question, Ash, about has the landscape changed? since David Beckham made his debut. It has, because the pool of players to choose from for English players has diminished. You know, it's diminished by about, I think it's by probably about a third. When I say pool of English players to pick from, pool of English players playing starting Premier League games has diminished and continues to diminish. So that's how the landscape has changed. That's why young English players will get a chance. I also think at the moment, you look at the success of the underage teams. OK, the under-19s had a bad time in the summer. However, you know, the success of those shows there are a lot of precocious. You know, there's a lot of precocious talent out there. And the landscape has also changed in that, and I think now, the England manager, because that pool of players is so shallow and it's hard for these young English players to get a chance in a Premier League first team, he's going to have to change. You know, he can't have a hard and fast principle, or he must play X amount of minutes for a Premier League club. You know, without saying that Guardiola's the font of all knowledge and, you know, we all should take his word for it, Southgate's only way, really, to choose Phil Foden is to say to Pep Guardiola, do you think he is ready for the England squad, the senior squad? I think he's got to be advised by him because, you know, the fact of the matter is he can be good enough for... He might be good enough for the England team and not good enough for Manchester City's team.
Sounds like Arsene Wenger back in 2006 when Theo Walcott got picked for the World Cup.
And how you told Sven then? He was good to go.
He hadn't played for Arsenal by that point. No. OK, next up, we're going to go back to the Premier League. We're going to talk about the controversy yesterday at Molineux. It was Wolves against Manchester City. More on that coming next. OK, lots of different editorial decisions on the back of the papers this morning. This is the back of the Sun, handball, Willy Bolly. This is yesterday at Molineux and Wolves' draw with Manchester City, Ali. What did you feel about the sequence of events in the build-up to the goal? He's offside. We think he was offside as well, the handball, the opening goal for Wolves to take the lead. But what did you feel, what did you think about the actual decision?
Well, I don't blame the officials for thinking it was a goal. I think probably the vast majority of anyone watching on TV thought it was a valid goal. The offside was close enough for it not to be, you know, it wasn't a clear offside. In fact, I probably think he was just onside. Most people in the ground would have thought it was a legitimate goal. There's a question if you go for a header and you don't head it, but it goes in off your wrist, I think. Some people have questioned whether he should have owned up. That's never going to happen, is it? So people have been saying, well, given we can't blame the referees and they're only human, we should have had... Why wasn't the Premier League using VAR for such... You know, this is why we like it, VAR, because it clears up these clear injustices that are of no fault at all of the referees. But I'm going to stick to my guns and say I don't think it's a mistake that we haven't got VAR. I have huge doubts about the way it is implemented and the long-term implications of it. And I'm glad that we're only going to use it now and again while we get to grips with it. You could even make a case to say, how is that a clear and obvious mistake if most people agreed with it when it happened?
Well, it's just not a goal, though, is it? I mean, it doesn't have to be a clear and obvious mistake. If someone actually punches the ball into the net, VAR picks up and disallows it.
Exactly. So the whole idea of only using it for clear and obvious mistakes
that's a bit of a red herring. It corrects wrongs. It's as simple as that. And that was just a blatant wrong. I mean, it's not the fact that the Premier League are not using it. It's just, I mean, it beggars belief, quite honestly. I don't know whether anyone saw the Barcelona game yesterday. And obviously, Valladolid believe they have equalised in the last minute, a Keco header in stoppage time. They believe they've equalised to make it 1-1 and get a great draw, and he was offside. VAR.
How many games did you watch yesterday? You watched Man City, Wolves, Man City. You were at Arsenal. Then watched the 5:30 Liverpool.
Just can't stop. But VAR there got the right result, you know, and obviously, so obviously La Liga have introduced it. French League have introduced it, the German League, which has started this weekend, the Bundesliga has introduced it for all of their games, with new initiatives as well to explain to the crowd exactly what's happening. They will be able to see VAR decisions after the referee has made his decision, so you can see why he made that decision. I just don't get it. I mean, I just do not get why the Premier League... And to be fair, I don't think it's... Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Champions League, UEFA, are embracing VAR. But once you see how it works in the World Cup and how it worked pretty seamlessly you know, listen, I was sceptical at first, and I think most of us were, but I don't see now. The figures have just been released. If you follow the International Football Association's board social media feed, all the surveys about how VAR worked at the World Cup, the amount of time it takes, I think the average VAR review was 55 seconds, and that's, you know, the average review when the referee goes over to see the screen was 83 seconds. I mean, really, I just think that the arguments now to say, well, what do the Premier League need to see how it works? I don't see how the Premier League needs to learn anything else about it.
It's the consistency, Andy, because the UEFA, with the Champions League, they're considering it, but it will be a consideration from the quarterfinals.
Oh yes, that's right.
Onwards.
Sorry, yes, yeah. So exactly.
So you won't see it. So you won't see it in the group stages because it's only the group stage. But in the real serious stuff, you see it.
What is football's? What is the pinnacle of football? What is the competition? The ultimate competition? It's the World Cup.
Yeah.
And it's been used, I think everyone would say, relatively successfully as a World Cup.
Well, it was brilliant.
So then how can you not introduce it elsewhere? One quick thing I would say on that Wolverhampton Man City thing, while I'm on, is that, you know, they get much maligned, but you would have thought that one of those extra assistant referees next to the goal would have spotted that, wouldn't they?
Do they have them?
No, they don't. That's what I'm trying to say. We have them in the Champions League.
I was going to say,
you never noticed them, really.
I know you had a good holiday, yeah.
No, but I thought that
but strange enough, again, they get a lot, you know, they get a lot of stick.
They don't do anything.
But then if he was there yesterday, surely he would have seen that, wouldn't he?
Well, I've seen instances like that in the Champions League when they stand behind and they don't do anything.
They're not allowed to do anything. They're not allowed to show. They're not allowed to show any.
But they do no harm,
sign
do
of
they?
doing anything.
No.
But anyway, that's by the way. But on VR is baffling why it isn't.
Okay, we need to move on because I want to talk a little bit about Liverpool because
No,
do you want to? Anything? No, you haven't say about it. Liverpool. They won at Palace in the week. Good win for them, an important win at Selhurst Park. Followed it up yesterday with a win back at Anfield. They're looking good, but do they look ready to challenge?
You have to say they do, because the only doubts commentators had about Liverpool under Klopp last season was scintillating going forward. He hasn't quite worked out the defence. Does he coach defending? I've heard he doesn't coach defending. Seems to have a blind spot over the keeper. Doesn't seem to take very seriously. He's prepared to wait a long time for Virgil van Dijk. Is he taking it seriously? If only they could get the defence sorted, they would be the team to challenge City. And he has got the defence sorted. There's no doubt about that. And they have not conceded a goal. They're winning games, not purely through scintillating football, but from being well organised and resolute. And it's hard to see their weak spot right now. So, yes, I'm not saying they'll definitely win the league. I'm saying I don't see any reason, given that he's addressed all the small issues and large issues that were holding them back last season. He's addressed them. So why not?
I mean, not just the win yesterday, but the win at Palace was the type of game that you might have expected them when they weren't playing particularly well at a very, very, very tough venue. You might have expected them not to win, to draw, to maybe even lose. But, you know, that was quite a professional performance. There's no reason at all why they shouldn't challenge for the title. You know, you would expect them to, and if they don't, it will be a failure on their part.
And if they don't, it won't happen, but if they don't challenge
for the title... You know
what's coming
here, don't you? You know what's coming.
No, they're fun to be around, aren't they?
If they don't challenge for the title, questions should be asked of the manager. He should be under the same, no less pressure than Jose Mourinho's under to be challenging for that title. Absolutely not. But he won't be, because he dances around the touchline. He's got a great smile, and, you know, they play this lovely, wonderful attacking football. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether they challenge or not.
Well, at least we put a smile on your faces. That's the most important thing. OK, we've run out of time, unfortunately, this morning.